Okay, so it's 2 after the hour. I'm going to get started. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first Employee Giving Program Speaker Series of 2022. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindsay Treadway. I'm the Executive Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy Relations at Exelixis. As you likely already know, each quarter since we launched our Employee Giving Program, we've invited one of our nonprofit partners to speak to us about their organization and important topics affecting our community. We've had some very informative and insightful discussions throughout the series so far, and today's presenter will surely follow suit. I'm honored to welcome Bryan Lewis, President and co-founder of KidneyCAN, to our discussion. As a kidney cancer survivor himself, Bryan has been an active legislative advocate and policy spokesperson for the kidney cancer community in Washington, D.C. and across the U.S. for over 6 years. As a brief overview, KidneyCAN was formed in 2019 when Bryan merged the organization he founded called the Kidney Cancer Action Network with another group called the Kidney Cancer Coalition, which was actually founded by Ralph and Brenda Knapp, two people you may remember that we featured in one of our patient video series a couple years ago. He'll go into more detail about what they do to fulfill their mission of accelerating cures for cancer. But just so you know, the organization has made tremendous progress since its inception to provide patients and caregivers with educational resources, support, tools for ways to help in their local community, and they played a very significant role in propelling research funding for kidney cancer, all with the goal of improving patient care. As many of you know, KidneyCAN is one of our valued advocacy partners that we've supported through our charitable contribution and medical education programs. From a charitable contribution perspective, we've supported several of KidneyCAN's initiatives, such as their district days in DC, advocacy days, other patient-focused educational programs like their Facebook Live discussions held in collaboration with the National Kidney Foundation. And additionally, Exelixis is honored to be one of the founding supporters of the organization's Kidney Cancer Research Summit that Bryan will talk to you more about in just a bit. On a personal note, I can honestly say that Bryan is one of the most collaborative, kind-hearted, thoughtful, and caring individuals I get to partner with through our advocacy relations work. He is just incredible in terms of how he convenes industry partners, other advocacy organizations, healthcare professionals, and the patient community. Every time I talk to him, I'm in awe of his commitment to the work that he does. And he also entertains my love about chatting about our two dogs before we hop off the line, which is great. The KidneyCAN team has been extremely generous with their time over the past several years that we've partnered, and we're thankful for Bryan taking time out of his busy schedule to educate our employees about all the incredible work they're doing to support the patient community. So following Bryan's discussion, we look forward to a lively Q&A session, so get your questions ready. You can submit your questions in the Q&A function on Zoom or use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to ask your question live. Please just let Bryan know your name and your role at the company if you do choose to raise your hand and ask your question live. And so with that, I am more than honored to turn the call over to Bryan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, everyone, for letting me have this opportunity to join you today. I really appreciate it. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here and to speak to you all. I'll do my best not to have too many technical difficulties with this Zoom call. First of all, as Lindsay's pointed out, I'm the president and co-founder with the Knapps of KidneyCAN. I'm also a husband and father to Marisa here and twins, now 15-year-old Jackson and Isabel. And I'm a kidney cancer survivor. And I'll tell you my story real fast. Was living on Capitol Hill at work. One evening went to the ER with some blood in my urine. Had a young 20-something year intern about 2 o'clock in the morning turned to me and told me the words that stopped time, like some of us have heard, which is, "Mr. Lewis, we're afraid you have cancer." And things stopped right then and then changed forever. And that's the new time clock for me. I was living in DC, working on Capitol Hill, working for a trade association, and had 1.5-year-old twins, as 46-year-old, pretty good health. Was told, to come back by the urologist next week and had a radical nephrectomy. Started immediately going out on the internet, the worst thing you could do, looking for ideas and information. Got second opinions up and down the East Coast and ended up being told pretty much you need to try this new drug Sutent in 2007 that had just come out. And the other opportunity was to try IL-2, which is a pretty severe binary choice for me. And so one cowboy surgeon at the NIH looked at my histology and realized that it could be a possible papillary clear cell mix in my cell makeup. And so I was picked up by the NIH, and the tumor board there suggested also that I go and start Sutent immediately. But this one cowboy doctor right here in the picture, Gennady Bratislawski, he said, no, he's young. Let's take him on. I could get this. And so, 13 hours later, after I was off the surgery room and in ICU, I made it. And so it's gone well for me, but it hasn't gone as well for some others. And so with that, we'll go to the next slide, please. I get to give my disclosures, which gets me off the mark for a moment. Here's my disclosures, KidneyCAN's disclosures. We've taken a lot of funding from our supporter industry partners. We have hundreds of kidney cancer patients and others. I'm on the NCCN guidelines panel, also on the board of directors of the IKCC. Next slide, please. So today's topics real quickly, I'm going to give you an overview of the genesis and mission of KidneyCAN, then we'll talk about our recent efforts around supporting patients directly with information, and then we'll move back in time to advocating for research funding, and then we'll finish up with accelerating cures. So next slide, please. So back in 2018, 2017, I was down in Dallas. A number of us are on Smart Patients, which is a community forum for kidney cancer patients and caregivers. Highly recommend it. We'll come back to that. And I was down at the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas giving a little presentation on what we were doing on the Hill. And I ran into Ralph and Brenda Knapp, and Ralph was on his, I believe, third or fourth clinical trial down there. And we got together and started talking, and we realized in talking to some other patients and caregivers that their expertise around fundraising, they have business acumen and a history of entrepreneurship, and their drive to work with their network to raise grassroots funds for, at the time, the RADVAX trial. I knew that my Hill experience plus them, 1 + 1 would equal 3. And so we got together and started working together. And next slide, please. What we came to realize is that awareness of kidney cancer helped us lead us towards advocacy, and that the advocacy efforts that we could undertake, if we were successful, would lead to funding, federal funding for kidney cancer research. And that research in turn, we would hope would propel us to new cures. And so next slide. So as we go through today's presentation, you'll see I try to highlight, and up in the right-hand corner of each slide, we'll try to touch on these because we believe that everything that we're doing at KidneyCAN should drive to one of these arrows towards accelerating a cure. So next slide, please. So I'm skipping forward a little bit because we just have undertaken this patient education and support area on our website. Other organizations were doing this, the American Cancer Society, the NCI, the National Cancer Institute. A lot of organizations have really up-to-date, valid information. We didn't want to recreate the wheel. So we took the time and said, let's start figuring out what are the big questions that people are asking. And we realized from our website analytics that people were coming to our site, but they were skipping or bouncing out, and we couldn't figure out why. And then we started tracking some of their search engines words and other ways of figuring out what they were looking for. And we realized the unique visitors were looking for words like treatment plan and diagnosis and other ways to cope with their kidney cancer diagnosis. And so that was the sort of genesis of the idea of creating these buckets of information. We've just gone down this path. You can take a look at where we are so far. We're in round 2 this spring and summer to continue to build that out. But we narrowed it down to sort of 4 big buckets. Diagnosis, people really need to know early and upfront about diagnosis. They need to know about building a care team, and we wanted to make sure that they had that information because that's crucial to their path. And then third, we wanted to have them understand that clinical trials are out there and available and a resource that they should consider. And then finally, we wanted to have a section on living well with cancer. So if you come back to KidneyCAN in 6 months, we hopefully will have a lot more information on these topics for patients. Next slide, please. about a year and a half ago during the pandemic, I have some New England background. We used to have town halls when I was up in the Boston vicinity. I was living in DC. We were used to having some kind of looking back, looking forward prognostication meeting. And I suggested this to the KidneyCAN team, and they sort of like gave me the big giant thumbs down. No one wants to do that. No one wants to hear about what's going on in DC backwards and forwards. And so we landed on this town hall concept where we would get patients to ask questions, and we would try to filter those into themes, and we would get experts to answer them from across the country. And so we started a town hall series. We did 3 last year. We just held our first one this year. We had Dr. Martin Voss out of Memorial Sloan Kettering and Dr. Robert Uzzo from Fox Chase. And they gave a look back on research and what's coming down the pike in trials and in research as well. And we will continue to do one this spring and one this summer. Next slide, please. As Lindsay also mentioned, we've had an ongoing great partnership with the National Kidney Foundation. We do 3 Facebook Lives, which I think we're going to have to change to something along the lines of Metaverse Live. But this year we're going to have 3 more. We've taken on topics such as nutrition, emotional health, clinical trials, exercise, and other topics. And we bring in experts and have a dialogue on the Facebook Live with the National Kidney Foundation. Next slide, please. I touched on this earlier. I highly recommend, if you do have family or friends that are involved with kidney cancer, Smart Patients is a wonderful resource. It connects patients. It allows them to speak in a community about anything and everything, and I highly recommend it, smartpatients.com. Next up, please. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, and I just finished talking to you about what we're doing on the patient resource side. But going back into the advocacy and the areas that we were trying to approach there, one of the things we realized back in 2014 is, and up to today, is kidney cancer research has been underfunded. And here's a graph from 2018 from the American Cancer Society. And you can see, we're down here with 13 grants compared to, say, breast cancer or colon cancer. So we had a lot of work to do. Next slide, please. So how does kidney cancer research happen? And one of the things we all know, it takes people. It takes people, and the next slide, please. It takes a lot of other things in addition to people. It takes people who are doing, mouse models, and they're doing preclinical work, or they're doing chemical manufacturing process work, or they're working with the FDA on approvals. There's a myriad of time and resources that go into every new drug and every new therapy that's out there. And so what we realized is it takes people, but it takes a tremendous amount of resources. And so all of these things have to happen in order for us to get towards cure. So next slide, please. So we decided to start building a grassroots army. KidneyCAN's a nonprofit organization with the mission of putting an end to kidney cancer. We want to accelerate a cure, and we do that by focusing on advocacy, research, and patient education. Advocacy Day is our attempt to bring people from across the country, a small grassroots army, if you will, of kidney cancer stakeholders. And we bring them together, we train them, and we talk about the issues, and we all go up to Capitol Hill and meet with our elected representatives.
What we want to do is not only just raise awareness, but raise the funds for research.
It is an opportunity for someone to, at a higher impact, talk with congressmen, senators, and their staff in regards to funding for cancer research, specifically kidney cancer research.
While this year will look different as we connect via Zoom with our elected representatives, the mission remains the same: to engage and educate policymakers on the needs and the urgency around kidney cancer research funding.
I'm really looking forward, once again, hoping to make an impact in research funding for kidney cancer. And this is one way that I can contribute.
We have found that these days have been very productive in getting the attention of Congress.
We're advocating for an increased funding at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, as well as through the KCRP, the Kidney Cancer Research Program.
The advocacy has paid off. We got involved and helped that line item grow, and we hope it continues to grow in terms of the dollars dedicated specifically to kidney cancer research.
No experience necessary. That's our tagline. We give an entire toolkit to the advocates so they're ready to go. And it even has a script if they want to use it. We've put some scientific information in there that's not real in-depth. We give a lot of facts and figures, and we give some do's and don'ts.
These people are wonderful, and they help you through everything. And we need you.
Your voice counts. Your story is important. We hear repeatedly the congressional offices, everybody's touched by cancer in this country. And so you can make a connection, tell your story, tell what's going on, and advocate for our position.
So much more work needs done. Somebody's got to do it. The more voices, the more awareness, the brighter the future.
All right, great. Thank you for that, taking a moment to watch that video. And so sort of to give you a little bit of fill in, I was living on Capitol Hill in 2014, 2015, we went up in 1s and 2s and started meeting congressional offices. That grew into 3s and 4s and 5s and then dozens. And now our Army is up in the hundreds, if not thousands. And there's a team out there, and in particular, Deb Bahan in Atlanta, Georgia, recruiting folks from across the country. We're going to have our March Advocacy Days coming up here in March 7th and 8th. And we already have, I believe, over 140, 150 registrants, about 30 plus states already represented, but we can always use more. So a little plug there. But back to the story, when we were going up on Capitol Hill, we realized that people had not heard about kidney cancer. We were able to tell our story, and we were fortunate enough, if you saw in the slide or the video presentation there, we met a champion in Congresswoman Nita Lowey out of New York. She was our champion. She was able to take and get us the $10 million for the community, for the kidney cancer community, built into the congressionally directed medical research program. And so with that, we continue to go back. And if we can go to the next slide. We've realized that we had no money for kidney cancer in 2016, but with this Army slowly going back repeatedly again and again, we've been able to almost triple where we did more than triple where we started. So we're now at $50 million annual appropriations through the congressionally directed medical research program. We're about to embark on asking for a little bit more in 2020, FY 2023. Next slide, please. So we received this line item and we received this money, and we started saying, well, what's happening with it? What's next? What are these folks doing with their funding? And so we pulled some of the researchers, we talked to some of the doctors that were involved in this research grant program, and we found out that of the 22 first awardees, none of them were really talking to one another. And it wasn't intentional. If you know research, a lot of times people have to get into their laboratories and put their heads down and do work, and they don't get a chance to share a lot about what they're doing. So this was the genesis of the idea. With a number of other folks, number of other physicians and researchers, we held a roundtable in Virginia Beach where we thought through what could be the next phase, what are the next things we could be doing. And then we held out near you all at ASCO GU, we held a ODARC 30 meeting before ASCO, and we got some of the thought leaders from around the country together. And the theme that came up was, yes, the basic and translational research for kidney cancer is a distant cousin in the research community, and they need to be recognized, and we need to bring more attention to that. And so that was the idea. Let's be disruptive, and let's figure out how to bring these folks together to move the ball downfield. And with that, I think we have another video. Next slide, please. Oh, well, yeah, we could go on right to the next slide.
Kidney cancer was a field that was always, for a long time, really underfunded. And then really through patient advocates going to the Hill, we now have a congressional directed medical research program, the Kidney Cancer Research Program, KCRP, and beautiful research is being done there. And the question was, how can we showcase some of that research? And so the idea for the summit was born. And then together with Tony Cherry and KidneyCAN and countless helpers and supporters. We have now KCRS, and it's now in its third iteration. It uniquely brings people from all kinds of backgrounds together, physicians, really basic scientists, translational scientists, industry partners.
So we're all excited to be here for KCRS 21. KidneyCAN is all about accelerating cures, and this is an opportunity to have thought leaders come together and share and break down silos.
I think if we're all in one room talking about one disease and focused on how to want to help each other cure it, as a team, we can do it.
What's amazing about this meeting is I'm hearing about a number of trials in progress, a number of drugs that are in development that I was just unfamiliar with. And it just shows you the bandwidth of research that's happening in kidney cancer nowadays. So meetings like KCRS 21 are just so essential in terms of broadening my horizons as an investigator and really opening up new opportunities for my patients.
Seeing the tremendous input from the patient advocates here, it gives us a reason we do this to help our patients. This meeting is, I think, one of the best catalysts for interaction, for coming up with new ideas. It's one of my favorite meetings of the year.
I'm really inspired in being here and being able to talk casually with other people who are in the field. And I know that the scientific exchange that happens here is fantastic. It's great for not only stimulating new ideas, but also sort of re-inspiring and giving a fresh perspective on what one does.
This is my first time attending the KCRS meeting, and really it's just been a spectacular meeting to be able to network with colleagues and bounce ideas and share experiences, and that's sort of how great research happens.
Just a few weeks after KCRS 19, one of our attendees, Dr. Bill Kalin, shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine due to his work on oxygen sensing, which is application in large part in kidney cancer.
The Kidney Cancer Research Summit is incredible. And being at a place like this, and with the brightest minds really in the world in terms of kidney cancer treatment and drug development, is exciting because it tells us that we know we've come a long way.
We're seeing already major survival boosts for all of our patients. And having these types of meetings allows us to kind of think together, launch projects together. And there's a lot of funding from these meetings that really focus on creating collaborations, which I think is the best way to move science forward quickly.
And this meeting now, especially one of the silver lining of COVID, is becoming more and more international. There's a huge virtual participation. We learn from each other.
What's even more exciting is I see that there's this new generation of people who are really, I think, going to take treatment to the next level. And I'm convinced that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see tremendous advances in the treatment of kidney cancer.
The DoD, the Department of Defense funding that has come through for kidney cancer research has created this resurgence of excitement in the kidney cancer community, and researchers now have funds that they can go after. And so we see this chance for them to come and talk about these new cutting-edge, high-risk, high-reward research projects they're working on.
One thing we have really tried to do is realize that industry is our partner. If the researchers in academia, they come up with a wonderful idea, but the idea can't go anywhere, we know that that's never going to reach a patient. So this group of beginning to end researchers and participants in the whole drug development, treatment development process, it's exciting.
I want to take something that you are discovering today to a patient quite literally tomorrow if possible. It never happens tomorrow, but the idea is, the hope is there, and this provides the energy to do that.
Really appreciative to everybody who's come together. We'd also like to especially thank the industry sponsors who made this possible. To know that there are really bright people, really passionate people out there trying to find a cure gives you hope all the time. Great. Well, thank you for bearing with us on that video. Appreciate you taking the time to watch it. You know, this like I said in the video, this event does mean so much to the patient community as well as to the clinical and research community. It's an opportunity for them to collaborate and break down silos, but the folks in the patient community get to see this happening. They know that progress is being made, and it gives a renewed sense of hope. So next slide, please. Yeah, so we're making progress. We've grown the funding. We have a grassroots army. We've raised over about $1 million for local efforts. We employed, our capital as we can directly to clinical and scientific endeavors, and we're planning our 4th annual KCRS. And I just want to, next slide. I just want to say thank you very much, for this opportunity. We've got a lot of work to do. I want to tell you all at Exelixis that Lindsay has been a stalwart in terms of caring about what our mission is and helping us to propel accelerating cure. So got a lot of work to do. You all are doing that work. We're trying to do our side of the equation, and together let's accelerate cure. So thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. That video, and I wanted to hold off my comments on the research summit, but everyone at the company who is aware of the KOLs who are involved with that meeting, it just speaks to your credibility. I remember when we first engaged on that, it was just an idea, and we were so excited to get involved early on to see where it's at, even in the midst of COVID and the amount of people you've been able to attract to that meeting. And we hear nothing but amazing things about the collaboration and the value that it's bringing to the treatment community. So kudos, you're being extremely modest in terms of what you've been able to accomplish just to that meeting alone. So congratulations on that. I also wanted to recognize, I forgot in the beginning to remind everyone it's World Cancer Day, and that was kind of the why we brought Brian on in the first place, to really focus today's session on a group that's really working to impact the patient community. So thank you. So we can start the Q&A session now. So as a reminder, you can just use the Q&A box on the Zoom the Zoom function, or the raise your hand function if you want to ask your question live. So I have one. I'm gonna start with. You mentioned the amount of people that you've been able to attract to the advocacy days and the district days. How are you, outside of smart patients, how have you been able to continue to increase that number of patients and caregivers who are leveraging your program and really on the ground doing the work on your behalf?
And that's great. It's a question that we grapple with all the time. I think that, organically has been one of the main ways that we've grown this. People in families, their extended family hears about this opportunity. I think once someone goes through our training, they realize, once they get one or two of those meetings behind them, they're pretty good at it. A lot of people can show passion pretty quickly, and if they stay on point, they can make a connection with their congressional office. So a lot of times it's family, extended family, that will join in, and that's been helpful. And then secondly, we've had a lot of clinicians/researchers join in. And I can't, say enough about our team. Deb Behan, again, they do a lot of the outreach to the clinical clinicians as well as researchers, and ask them. And we've now reached out to award winners and said, listen, hey, you've gotten some of this funding. You need to come with us and tell Congress how it's going and what you've been doing, and the return on investment. And when we've had those kinds of meetings where we have a researcher and a patient or caregiver, and they tell their combined stories, we hit a home run pretty much all the time in Congress.
Right, yeah. And I know that's an area, for our employees that, we have a small government affairs team, as you know, and that's an area that we're continuously trying to see how we can make an impact from a industry perspective as well. So another question is, how has COVID impacted kidney cancer patients from diagnosis to treatment, and how have you been a support team for folks who have having a difficult time during the pandemic?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, I think there's multiple layers to the answer. One, unfortunately, kidney cancer doesn't have any early detection biomarkers. And so the majority of times folks are finding it through incidental findings. And as you know, during the pandemic, unless it was an urgent matter, many hospitals were not, allowing folks to come in, or they were postponing. And so we're concerned that due to the pandemic, the number of findings has, dropped. We've heard that from the clinical side anecdotally. We don't have, exact numbers. The other thing is, there has been a sense of, we're in this together that we all talk about, where there is the community of trying to talk to one another more. There's folks on our team, Susan Poteet in particular, who spends a lot of time, involved with sort of caring for folks early on in their diagnosis when they're trying to figure out which way to go and which way is up. So the impact has been pretty harsh. We won't know the exact numbers, I think, until another couple of years and see what there's some concern, if not a lot of concern out there, that there's going to be sort of this tsunami coming after the pandemic of folks finding out.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to continue to track that. The next question is from Jose, who and he said he's looking forward to seeing you at ASCO GU. So he says diversity participation in clinical trials is a key topic now, and it's a lot of minorities may have a lack of trust or understanding, or there's not a lot of education around clinical trial research. So have you thought about any initiatives to support diversity recruitment in clinical trials?
Yeah, another good one. I guess a first way, and not in defense of what's the reality, but I believe, statistics bear out that the average kidney cancer patient is a male, 64 years old, white. Unfortunately, a lot of the institutions that are recruiting for clinical trials, a lot of times are not, don't have a diverse clientele. What we're trying to do and what KidneyCAN is trying to do is to engage not only in Washington, D.C. with diversity in clinical trials as legislation and supporting that, to try to incorporate that into our recruitment of advocates so that we talk about this as a community. And then, I think what we're trying to figure out is on a local level, how can patients work with other patients? How can patients work with clinicians to help them, broaden the footprint locally? Because I think there's a lot of talk at the sort of federal level and sort of on the top level, but I think there's a lot of work that's got to be done down, on the ground in community settings. And all politics is local, as Tip O'Neill used to say. So we got to figure out how to bring it down to the local level.
Right. Yeah. And I know that you've worked with other organizations outside of the kidney cancer space to prostate to group together to see how they're addressing the issue as well. And that's an initiative here at Exelixis too, diversity in clinical trials. The next question is, could you talk a little bit more about smart patients and kind of what are the types of conversations that you're seeing on that platform? How has it benefited patients? And, one piece that I always am interested in is also kind of for the caregiver support angle as well. So how do you see smart patients serving as a really good tool for the community?
Another great question. To answer the direct question, what kind of topics, I think it's the opposite. I don't think there's any topic that's off limits other than asking for money, raising money, or I think too much political speech. Other than that, anything's open and fair game. I think there's a lot of conversation, especially if the newly diagnosed show up and are, just in this sort of white noise period and they need someone to walk them through carefully. That there's a lot of that goes on. I think there's a lot of discussion around side effects and management. I think there's a lot of discussions around getting second opinions. I think there's a lot of discussion around if someone's searching and maybe in a rural area, how to get them to a comprehensive cancer center or how to help them build a care team. So there's all kinds of conversations going on. And then there's just casual conversation, people going on vacation or taking a trip to participate in a clinical trial and reporting on it. So it's across the board. Did that answer all of the parts of the question?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, next question. So what do you see kind of in terms of, I know you mentioned you found that your education portal, that's something that you needed to kind of enhance, but where do you see kind of the biggest barriers to treatment for patients, and what are, outside of, you know, questions around treatment landscape or kind of getting into clinical trials, what are some of the other topic areas that you're seeing that patients are really concerned about?
Yeah, really, really good stuff. I mean, the barriers to treatment question is broad and complex in that the United States is large geographically and complex with urban and rural settings. And, you know, quite a bit of the United States doesn't have comprehensive cancer centers within a couple hundred miles sometimes. And so, you know, a big barrier right now is access to experts. Kidney cancer, you know, no offense to the community setting physicians out there, but, you know, the cancer landscape in general is changing almost daily, if not, you know, weekly. And then the kidney cancer community, and specifically, you know, from 2007, where we had, you know, 1 or 2 treatment therapies, and now I think there's 17, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's combinations. You can't expect folks to be up on the latest research and the latest trial information. And so we try to guide folks, if we can, towards, you know, expert centers, centers of excellence that are, you know, doing clinical trial work, or, you know, are participating with a large number of kidney cancer patients. That's, you know, difficult because we have a big country, and, you know, I guess one good thing that's come through this pandemic is the, you know, accelerated use of telehealth. And we, KidneyCAN, are going to be embarking this spring on, you know, more pushing, you know, behind legislation for telehealth and the ability to get reimbursed for telehealth and cross-state line telehealth. So I think the biggest barrier right now is getting folks to experts. But there's a multitude of other issues around transportation, taking time off from work, the financial toxicity that surrounds a lot of folks in kidney cancer. So there's you know, multiple issues. What KidneyCAN is doing is, because we're not big enough to take on all of those issues, we participate in forums with and collaborate with other organizations. Like you mentioned, we belong to a group called OVAC, One Voice Against Cancer, where we push for certain things. We belong to the Defense Health Research Consortium. We work with the ACS, American Cancer Society, and other groups, AUA. So we try to use our voice as part of a larger voice on some of these big macro issues.
Right, no, that's great. Next question. Is there any upcoming legislation for kidney cancer research funding that you're keeping an eye on? I know you mentioned the, you know, the funding that you're hoping to continue to increase, but is there anything that you're particularly excited about or keeping an eye on in DC?
Yeah, tangentially, but could be directly. You know, there's a new piece of legislation to try to authorize and ultimately appropriate funds for a new agency. I'm not a big proponent of new government agencies, but this one is called ARPA-H, stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Some of you may have heard of DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And they do things a little bit backwards. They try to be first to fail. And they set up an agency for defense projects where they try to figure out things that they've been unable to figure out and solve unmet needs. And so Congress and the president have proposed the creation of this ARPA-H organization. They're talking about setting it up at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, as another part of the NIH. We're not really sure how that's going to play out if it does get set up, because I'm not so sure the NIH needs another institute, but there's a strong argument to be made that because so much research is coordinated out of there now, that's the perfect place for it. So if they have autonomy, ARPA-H is something that we're supportive of. Like I said, we're supportive of some of there's 2 telehealth bills that are in Congress. We're probably going to get behind what's called the CONNECT Act, which is trying to improve the capabilities of telehealth medicine going forward after the pandemic. Other than that, we consistently advocate for increased funding for the NIH because we think the pay line there needs to increase, as well as the funding in basic and translational research I think there's a statistic somewhere around above 90% of all new FDA approved therapies have had some funding at some point from the NIH. And so we feel like, if it's going to get to a patient, it's got to come from funding for basic research. So those are the big ones: NIH, NCI, and our KCR, Kidney Cancer Research Program.
Great. There's a couple of things you're following. And kind of along those same lines, does anything in President Biden's restart of Cancer Moonshot, the Cancer Moonshot program, particularly interest or excite you?
Yeah, it's exciting that cancer is brought up into the news, into the forefront of the news, and the top of mind of people. I think that's important. I think, we have, as a country, have a lot of challenges, but cancer continues to be one that we need to wage full-on warfare against. And I think that, seeing this effort to probably start up or stand up this ARPA agency, a continued robust funding for the NIH and the NCI, I think if any president has had, his heart, broken by this disease, he has, and he and the First Lady yesterday, spoke quite, at length about this. So, I feel good about it. As anything that happens in DC, the devil's in the details. I think you're seeing a collaboration, that is noteworthy and helpful. I believe, big data and the ability to coordinate data is going to be important going forward. I mean, one of the things I'd like to see, and this is sort of in my wish list, I don't know if we'll get an audience or not, but there's so many silos, as we know, and this is an issue that we're trying to break down at the Kidney Cancer Research Summit. Get these people talking. But I think the medical community, and I'm open to debate on this. It's very focused on who can get published and get things out there first and foremost. And that is important. I understand that, but we need to be sharing across multiple platforms here, folks. I mean, that's the key to advances, is getting people to be sharing their information. If we can create the system a little bit differently so that, and I'll get off my soapbox here, we need to take some of these breakthroughs and give them access across multiple institutions.
Yeah. And that's, the work that you did, like I said earlier, with the research summit, just to bring people together, folks that may not, have the opportunity to be in the same room is really amazing to see. Next question is, how you as a cancer survivor, how has that influenced and fueled all the work you're doing outside of the obvious? What work were you doing prior to forming the organization that has really helped and allowed you to become so successful in your role?
I guess I'm a lawyer by trade, so I probably talk too much in general. But what I think that, working in DC, there's this inside the beltway mentality. A lot of times people, are playing in the game all the time, trying to know what's the next thing that's going to happen and who's got the most influence. But I think once you live there for a little while and you see how the system works, it's like a lot of other things. It's like going in and building a relationship with anybody else in your community. And if you start doing that and you start getting to know people in Congress, a lot of times you're meeting with staff members. You're fortunate to meet with elected representatives directly a lot of times. But it's just continually speaking as one voice as a community again and again. And I think that we just kept sort of chipping away, and we had a break with Congresswoman Lowy, and then we took that and built from there, and we've been fortunate to just keep sort of pounding away. It's not very eloquent, but that's what's been happening.
But it's the truth. Coming out of the last Kidney Cancer Research Summit, what are some of the areas of research that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, so, I believe it's 70% of kidney cancer is clear cell, the histology of clear cell, but there's still another 30% that's not. And, you have papillary and chromophobe, and then you have 12 or 10 or 12 others that are, just barely even known. I can't even remember all of them sometimes. And so we're seeing some emergence of focus on non-clear cell, which I think is important, because folks that don't have any opportunity to have any therapy, that's wrong. And so we've got to continue to do something about that. At the same time, when you're seeing all these breakthroughs, especially you saw in the video with Dr. Kalin's breakthrough on oxygen sensing in cells, and then that leads to a Nobel Prize. That's pretty exciting stuff. And to know that, there's now adjuvant therapy for VHL disease, and maybe, and kidney cancer now as well. And there's other things that are happening that we didn't think were going to happen several years ago. And I think we're on the cusp of some more breakthroughs, hopefully, over the next several years. So it's exciting to see, some of these early, researchers having a couple of years under their belt, coming back and adding more research to what they've already started. And that's what we're hoping to share each year, some of these breakthroughs.
Great. Yeah. Next question is, in terms of the advocacy days, because I know you had to, everyone had to shift to a virtual model. Do you feel like that hindered the work you could do? Did it help expand the work you could do? Or talk a little bit about how that's impacted some of the initiatives that involve the patient and caregivers.
Yeah, it was sort of and it still is a little bit of a blessing and a little bit of a curse, but the bottom line is the blessing was we've got to increase our reach of patients. Folks did not have to get up and travel from across country, come to Washington, D.C., take a few days off from work, spend money to come and then go see their elected representative. They can do 15 to 20, 30-minute increments in their living room all day. And so that's where our numbers went from in the 20s and 30s of folks up to 120, 150 folks at a time. So our reach expanded dramatically, which meant our influence increased as well. So that's been great. On the flip side is I get a sense sometimes that some of the congressional offices all day long they just do Zoom calls. And so we're just another Zoom call in a litany of other Zoom calls. So I think there's something to be said about the person-to-person, face-to-face aspect of it. But we continue to, march on with virtual meetings and build those relationships as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, we're going to wrap up soon. I think, Bryan, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's anything that you wanted to let our employees know, a plug for the group, anything at all, that one more kind of leaving thought for our colleagues.
Wow, I actually, you're catching me off guard here. I wish I had something really sharp, smart to say.
Sorry.
But I will say this, which is collaboration. That has been a theme around KidneyCAN, around our summit, around our partnership with other kidney cancer organizations in this space, because I'm not going to solve this. Exelixis isn't going to solve it. We're going to need a community to do this. And so we all have to sort of take off our ego lapel pins for a little while and just sort of move forward on collaboration. And, I can see that with what you all have done with BMS, that's an example. We need to do more of that, where we're all working together. And KidneyCAN, thankfully, we have now, I think, 10 different partner organizations that we're all joining forces for advocacy days now, which is, that says a lot when congressional offices look at us and see us as different organizations maybe, but one voice. And that's powerful. And if we don't stay as one voice and we start dividing into little small voices, we're going to be ineffective.
Yep. Well said. Well, I just wanted to remind everyone too, before we wrap up, that right now on our employee giving program, Benevity platform, we are double matching, and we have a giving opportunity specific to KidneyCAN. So please go on and donate to Bryan and his team and all the amazing work they're doing. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. These are really been insightful and great conversations, and we just want to keep them going for all of you guys. So thank you for joining. And a big, big thank you to Bryan for taking the time to educate our employees. We absolutely love working with your team and just are so appreciative of all the work that you're doing for the patient community. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the ongoing, just support of what we've been doing. Lindsay, I'll embarrass you a little bit. If it weren't for that meeting at the W Hotel at ASCO GU, along with others, believing in what we were starting, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you for your ongoing support. I appreciate it.
Of course. Good. Well, thank you, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.